So I made a transmission thread on the ATS subreddit, hoping to get a response about why the Allison automatics aren't anything like the real deal. And I noticed there was some interest from some other people about big truck transmissions and big trucks in general. So I thought I would make a little video showing some of the differences between the real thing and the truck sims. Plus, some things that SCS has done a very good job on actually simulating. So this is my 2003 Kenworth T600. I've owned this truck for about a year and a half. It's been a great truck. Obviously you can see everything's ripped out of the cab right now, and the sleeper will be next once it warms up. I've been working a local job driving some dump trucks, and this thing sat for a while last summer, and the sunroof leaked up here a bit. And you can see it was a real hot and humid summer, and it kind of grew some nasty mold while it was sitting because I failed to check up on it, and it's kind of growing on everything. So at 1.3 million miles, I figured it was a good time to do it anyway, because these Kenworths, they tend to have, at least when they're owner-operator spec, they tend to have carpet in the sleeper and in the cab. For whatever reason, I hate carpet in the cab. It just gets nasty because you're stepping in and out of here all the time. So, good excuse to tear it apart, clean it up, and build it up exactly how I've always wanted to. So on to the transmissions. I've driven 8LLs, 9 speeds, 10 speeds, 13 speeds, and 18 speeds. The one I haven't driven is a 15 speed. That shifts just like a 10 speed and is a deep reduction transmission, just like the 8LLs. Most commonly used in construction applications, the 8LLs and the 15 speeds. You'd probably, the majority of dump trucks you're probably going to see an 8LL in, and then maybe for trucks that pull dump trailers or trucks that are used on a farm, those you might from time to time find a 15 speed in. Over the road trucks are generally going to have a 9, 10, 13, or an 18 speed. So this is an Eaton Fuller 13 speed, and all those, the 9s, 10s, 13s, 15s, 18s, and the 8LLs, they all have the same double H pattern to them. The gear positions are generally going to be the same. The 15 speed is the kind of oddball, but I'm not even going to get into the 8 and the 15 speeds for this because you're just not going to see those on over-the-road trucks. This button up here is the range selector. You'll see this on all of them. The button over here on the 13s and 18s, it's referred to as a splitter button. And on the 8 speeds and 15 speeds, it is used to put the transmission into deep reduction. It's blue on the 8 and 15s, red on the 13s, and gray on the 15 speeds. So 9 speeds used to be probably the most common transmission. Not anymore. 10 speeds are by far the most common. They won't have any splitter button. Everything is controlled just with the range selector up here. So the 10 positions, you would have first where low is, second, third, fourth, fifth, then you pre-select high range, come out of 5th gear, go all the way over to where low is marked here, pull back again. So 1st and 6th gear are actually in the same position, so that's your 6th gear, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, and over and up is your reverse. On a 9 speed, it's just 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, pre-select high range, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. So on a 9 speed, you've got 1st gear where low is, and that's it. On a 10 speed, this is 1st gear where low is, and also 6th gear when you're in high range. Alright, so on a 13 speed, I'm going to ignore the numbers that are written on top of the shifter here, just because they'll do more to confuse than anything. Over in the low position, over and back, 1st gear, 2nd gear, 3rd gear, 4th gear, 5th gear, pre-select high range, 6th gear. Now in 6th gear direct, I'm going to push this forward. Now we're in 6th gear overdrive. So that would actually be 7th gear. 8th gear, 9th gear, 10th gear, 11th gear, 12th gear, and 13th gear. Alright, so an 18 speed will shift just like a 13 speed, with the only difference being, you see how there's the white gears and the black gears? On the white positions on a 13, that's your high range. The black ones is your low range. Now on the 18 speed, you can also use your splitter button in low range. Now on ATS, they've got it wrong with low gear. So on 18, you got two positions in low gear. In the game, they say to get in the second low gear position, you have first with the range selector in low, and then second low is with the range selector in high. That's not right. You can actually do that, but the transmission is not designed to do that. What it should be is when you're in low gear, you're in low range, you've got low direct, push the splitter button forward, and you've got low overdrive. So those are your two gears, and then, it'll shift just like a 13 for the rest of the low, except you can split them, and when you're in high range, same deal. Shift just like a 13, and that you can split the gears. So really, I've heard you can actually take a 13 speed and remove the little mechanism here that keeps you from moving the splitter in low range, and it will shift just like an 18. The gear ratios, I believe, are a little bit different, so it wouldn't be a true 18. Plus, the 13 speed has a bushing, where the 18 speed has a bearing on some shafts in the transmission. I'm not sure if it's the main shaft or the counter shaft, probably the counter shaft, I would imagine, that is designed to handle the extra torque for splitting the gears in low range that a 13 speed does not have. Couple differences between a real truck and the game. First of all, they call in the game in the control settings, they refer to it as an exhaust brake. The majority of older road trucks in the U.S. are actually going to have an engine brake, commonly called a Jake brake. Jacobs is actually a manufacturer of, I think they designed the original engine brake or something. So they're very commonly called a Jake brake. Official term is going to be an engine brake. The one exception would be the Picard motor. I don't believe has a true Jake on it. It might have an exhaust brake. I don't know. I've never actually had one of those. I know it has some kind of a brake, but I don't think it's a true Jake. Now there's also in the game there's control settings for a brake retarder, and you'll notice that like all the transmissions, like you'll have a regular 13 speed, and then later on you can upgrade to a 13 speed retarder. I'm not saying it's inaccurate, it's just very, very, very uncommon to see them on an over-the-road truck. Over-the-road truck's generally going to have an engine brake of some type, but that's it. You're not going to have a brake retarder. Sometimes those retarders are electric, hydraulic, usually used in specialty applications. Not something you're going to see in your standard over-the-road truck. But, they put it on there, so hey, more power to them. Another thing is the interaxial differential, called the power divider. Would have been a nice thing to see if they were going for detail. Because, let me step over here. On over-the-road trucks, there's so much weight on the axles that if power was equally transmitted between both differentials, it would actually cause a lot of binding and excessive wear. So there's, in very simple terms, there's actually three differentials on a big truck. You've got one differential here, one differential here, and if you don't know what a differential is, it's basically just going to allow the different sets of wheels, so like that set and this set, to turn at different speeds while you're going around a corner or something. But pretend this power divider is, well, it actually pretty much is a differential between the two main differentials. So if I were to jack up this one side of this first drive axle here, this set of wheels here would spin and the other three would not. Now if I flip that power divider lock in the cab, it's going to lock up this power divider here, which is going to equally divide power between this front differential and the rear differential. So it's kind of like a differential lock between the differentials. So that just means that both axles are now going to have power. So I could, if I had this wheel if this was stuck in the mud here and spinning, I could, and this rear axle here was not, I could flip that switch and it would make sure that I had power on this axle as well to get out of a slick spot. You can see actually driving it out of the field, I got stuck and flipped the power divider, crawls right out. On some off-road applications, you'll see true differential locks, where the differentials themselves on the axles have lockers too. So if you lock up the power divider and lock up your differentials, you would have, if both axles had diff locks on them, you would actually have all 4 sets of wheels locked up. But over the road trucks, which are only going to be set up just like this one, where normally only technically one axle has power, and if you lock up the power divider, it will supply power to both axles to get you out of a slick spot or whatever. Trying to think of what else. Couple things, little detail things. When you've got the cruise control on in game, pressing the throttle will cut out your cruise control, which is wrong. You can stay on the cruise control, and let's say you just want to pass somebody, put your foot in it, pass around them, let off the throttle, and the cruise control will just keep on going. However, pressing the brake or the clutch will actually activate or deactivate the cruise control. Fifth wheel slide. That's what this switch is for. This lets you actually move the fifth wheel, which is the trailer hitch basically on this truck, back and forth. Has to do with weight distribution, because you're allowed only certain weights on the front axle, the group of axles on the back of the truck, and the group of axles on the trailer. And so by sliding the fifth wheel, you can move weight to or from the front axle on the truck to the rear axles. Air suspension, flip this, and it's going to deflate the airbags on the back of the truck, because the rear suspension actually rides on air, and so when you deflate it, it drops down. Just makes it a little bit easier to get under some trailers. Dump valve, this would be something you might see on like a dump trailer, where you've got a drop axle on the trailer. Won't usually see this in an over-the-road truck. At some point this truck may have pulled dump trailers before I bought it, so that's what this would be for. Picking up or putting down your lift axle or drop axle, whatever you want to call it. What else we got here? Lots of gauges. That's for your 2 air tanks. That's your brake application pressure. Your axle temp for the front drive axle. Or oil temperature for the rear drive axle. Transmission oil temperature. Fuel gauge. This gauge is really cool here. This measures the amount of pressure in the airbags on the rear suspension, which, after getting used to the truck and the weight, you can pretty much tell how much weight you got on the rear axles. So you could tell, okay, this trailer is probably going to have my axles overweight. I might need to slide the tandems a little bit or something like that. This is your fuel filter vacuum, which you can actually see because this truck's been sitting so long. It's got a little bit of algae or something probably grew in the tanks. And when I fire it up here, you'll actually see it goes up into the red, so that's a good indication. I need to get that algae out of the tanks and replace the fuel filter. That's just a temperature gauge for the outside. Voltmeter, water temperature, turbo boost, your oil pressure, your engine oil temperature, and normally the last thing that this truck is missing where that cover is would be a barometer, which measures the temperature of your exhaust gases. Normally they're mounted behind the turbochargers on big trucks like this. This little switch down here is for the tri-pack, which is actually a very small motor, engine, whatever you want to call it, over on the side here. These aren't very common, but they're very nice to have. It's got a little 2-cylinder Yanmar diesel engine in there, and it's hooked up to an alternator and an air conditioning compressor. And so there's the condenser on the back of the cab. So basically, when I have this truck parked and I'm in the sleeper, I don't have to run the big engine, which this truck has a C15 Caterpillar. That's the 6NZ serial. Last year, before they started putting all the emissions crap on trucks since 2003. In my opinion, it's the best Caterpillar off-the-road engine ever made. That's the pure reason, well, not the only reason, but a very large reason why I bought this truck, because of that engine. But if you're on your 10-hour break, you don't want to be idling that engine. Not only is it bad for an engine to idle that long, it just produces excessive wear for them. You got to stay comfortable. So that little engine out there under the couch there is actually a box, which has a blower and everything for the air conditioning, and that's what the air conditioning compressor on there is powering. And it's also got a little electric heater, not an electric heater, a diesel fired heater, made by Espar, I believe. And here's the little control panel for it. So actually, let's see, it's on standby right now, so it should actually crank up here. Well, you know what, I don't want to start that up because I don't want to run it right now and just shut it back off. But you can use this to control everything when you're sleeping. Got a fridge there, the microwave up there. I've got an inverter inside this cabinet here. That's all, that inverter and everything is part of the tri-pack package. Now, on a big truck like this, there's two ways to shift gears. You can either double clutch, which a lot of companies are going to want you to do, and that's how you're taught to shift. Basically, for each time, you can't even press the clutch down without a good chair in here, because there's so much pressure on these clutches. It'll make this little chair that I'm sitting on tip back here. But when you go to shift gears, let's say I'm in first gear and I'm going to second gear, you'll press the clutch once, come into neutral, let out the clutch. That's going to sync everything in the transmission up, because these transmissions are not synchronized. Push in the clutch and then go into second gear. So normally it would look something like this. About like that speed for every shift. Now, me personally, I float gears. This is my truck. I've floated gears in every truck I've driven. But to float gears, you have to have a very good feel for the transmission, otherwise you can damage it. But since these are not synchronized, once you learn it, they're pretty easy to float. So, like, you'll notice right now when I try to go into, let's see, I can't get in reverse now because the teeth of the, pretend this is two teeth of the gears, they're actually pushing together. And so when you float gears, you're lining up the teeth on the gears so they mesh together like this. And you can actually feel it. If you put a little bit of pressure on there, you'll start to feel them tick, 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 tick. And then when everything lines up, it will just mesh together like this. These trucks getting in gear from a stop, a lot of people when they're learning will struggle with it because they push the clutch in, but they can't get it in gear because those teeth are meshing together. So what you'll do when you stop, you'll push the clutch all the way to the floor, which will engage a clutch brake, which basically stops everything from spinning. But when you go to put it in gear, it still won't go because the teeth are pushing together. So then you'll actually let out just a little bit on the clutch and stuff will start to turn. Put a little bit of pressure and then it'll fall right into gear. So floating is just you're shifting the gears without using the clutch. I only use the clutch to start and stop. I always start out in low gear. I might start out in second gear sometimes if I'm bobtailing, but anytime I've got a trailer behind me, loaded, empty, whatever, I start out in low gear because I pay for the clutch on this truck. See some of these drivers sit there, start out in third and fourth gear loaded. Whatever, man. It's, that's your choice. But I could tell you, anybody that owns their truck and pays for a clutch, you're going to take care of it, and that means starting out in lower first gear. So, that's about that. One more thing. I've watched some of these videos of people playing the game sometimes, and they sit there and tack the engine up to the governor before they shift. That's not how you drive a big truck. Especially these big motors like this 15-liter Caterpillar, I hardly ever take this engine over 1500 RPM. Cruising RPM for me, its sweet spot is right around 1400 RPM. So that's in overdrive, which is 13th gear, puts me right at about 1400 RPM, which is 62 miles an hour. That's just where I find this truck is very happy. But you do not drive a truck by tacking it out like a car. Some of the smaller engines, like the little Picard motors, you might have to wind them out a little more, 1700 RPM. Some trucks that are geared lower, their cruising RPM might be higher. But big diesel engines like this, they make a lot of torque down low, so you do not need to wind the thing all the way out every time you shift a gear. One thing that was kind of poorly simulated in ATS is the engines have very little low-end torque. When you start out with a truck like this, I could put this truck in 4th gear and just let out the clutch and this thing would take off. So, low gear, let out the clutch. You can imagine how much torque this thing has at idle. That's, without touching the throttle. If you're loaded, like if you've noticed on a hill or something, on an off-ramp, you're going up a hill in ATS, and you go to start out, you actually might have to either hold the brake and give the truck a little bit of throttle, or something like that. That's not realistic at all. Normally what you would do starting out on a hill, got your foot on the brake, let out the clutch till it starts to engage a little bit, you let off the brake, you let out the clutch, idle, no throttle, the truck will take off with full 80,000 pound gross load and you'll be fine. Some things that I did think they did a really nice job on was, for example, the engine brake and cruise control interaction. On a big truck like this, I've got settings for the different levels of the engine brake. ATS doesn't have that, but if you have the cruise control on, it does. So this is off. This might operate the Jake or engine brake on 1 or 2 cylinders. This is probably 3 or 4, and then this is all 6 cylinders. Now, if you've got the cruise control on over here and you're going down a hill and you have it in any of these 3 positions, it will automatically engage the Jake brake to try to maintain a speed if you're going down a hill. Now, the cool thing is, and this is done really well in ATS, if you have the Jake brake on high like this is, I'm talking about driving this truck, and start going down a hill, the first couple miles an hour over whatever your cruise is set, it'll engage it on low. You start to speed up more, it'll put it on this medium setting, and as you still take off, it'll put it on this high setting. And that's also simulated in the game, which I thought was just really neat. That's not something you see very often. So, overall, I think it's got a lot of promise to be a really cool simulator, but it does need some work on a couple things. And finally, because I know everybody will say, well, I want to hear what the truck sounds like, I'll start this up. Oh, one more thing that was missing. I'm glad I just turned the key on. You hear that beeper? Low air. That was one thing that's missing from the game that I think should really be there. Trucks are required to not only have a visual indication, but also have an audible indication when your air pressure is below around 60 psi. Now, as soon as I start this up, you're going to hear a bunch of air hissing because the seats have airbags on them. So, as you're bouncing up and down, going down the road, it absorbs a lot of that air. But the little tubes are just hanging out here and they're not plugged off, so everything will start hissing. Plus, the phone camera is crap anyway. So, this truck's been sitting for a couple weeks, but we're at 12 volts and it's only 35 out, so it should fire right up. You can see, look even at idle, how high the vacuum on the fuel filter is. That's what I was talking about earlier. I used to pull trailers for Schneider, so that's why I've still got a number and all that on the side. I don't pull trailers for them anymore. So, The starter was turning over a little slow, so I'm going to let this truck run for a while here. Let's see, as long as my brake pedal is not stuck, I can put this on high idle here. We'll turn the cruise control on and press the set button. I'll let it run for 30-45 minutes like this. Good to let it run and warm up and whatnot and charge the batteries up, and it should be good to go. Thanks for watching.